We're in the book of Ephesians, and we've been looking at the husband-wife relationship and how it parallels the relationship Christ has with the church. But it would be unfair to have only husband-wife relationship covered. So in chapter 6 of Ephesians, we find the relationship of children. And here's what it says: Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Now, before we go any further, I want to be sure you understand that children are to obey their parents in the Lord. That means when we have ungodly parents, we need to be sure that that's not in the Lord. However, certainly a child that's being raised in a Christian home that are following godly principles, children are to obey their parents. We certainly don't want to leave open child slavery or incest or any of those things as being obeying your parents. That's certainly not what's intended here. We said that the husband was the head of the household and the wife was to be in submission to him. But they're all to be in fear of the Lord, submitting to one another. So now, what does it say about children? It says, honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise. Because it goes on and says, so that it may be well with you and that you may have and live a long life on the earth. So children are not only to obey their parents in the Lord, but they're to honor their father and mother, which makes a promise that if you do those things, it may be well with you and you'll live a long life on this earth. But then it has a word of caution to fathers. Remember, he's the head of household. He's the one that's supposed to be directing it spiritually. And it says, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger. Now, again, let me stop right there and say, this doesn't say, fathers, don't ever make your children angry. Inevitably, you're going to make your children angry. But it says, do not provoke. Provoke means to deliberately agitate. And fathers who deliberately agitate their children are just as guilty as anybody in the family. And so here it's very, very carefully worded that fathers aren't to provoke. They're not to deliberately agitate, irritate your children to anger, but bring them up. Now listen carefully. Bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. It's a great responsibility. When we look at what the Bible describes as a relationship of a father to a son, a father to a daughter, and we see that their responsibility as the head of the household is to sanctify them, set them aside, train them, teach them, nurture them, encourage them in the things of the Lord, discipline of the Lord, instruction of the Lord. That's a pretty great responsibility. And one day, all fathers will give an account for how well they've done that. That's something that every father should think about. His responsibility and how well has he performed that responsibility. Not just what people see at church on Sunday or Wednesday, but what do people see out in everyday life about the way a father is raising his family, sanctifying his family. One other thing I'd like to say before I close out this devotion, and that is the balance that a husband has as both a husband and a father and the provider of shelter and nourishment. It is an incredibly difficult task to keep all of that in balance. It's just as much a difficult thing, but even more difficult is when the father is absent. Now, there are a lot of different ways and reasons for being absent. For those that are assigned to the military, for those that are first responders, there's a sacrifice. Many times they can't be present when they'd like to be present. But let me just tell you, if you ever want to know the importance of a father in a home, go take a look at the statistics of what percentage of the prisoners in our jails and prisons came out of fatherless homes. Take a look at the children that get into trouble and are troubled themselves because they came from fatherless homes. I really appreciate Coach Dungy, formerly of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who lived in the community that we lived in Florida, who challenges men to be men in the home, good husbands and good fathers. Children, obey your parents in the Lord. Honor your father and mother. A commandment with a promise. Fathers, don't provoke your children. Be patient, be kind, but that doesn't mean to lack discipline. And fathers, as much as possible, stay in the home. Don't leave your family for extended periods of time or permanently, where the father's influence is not felt by the children. I think God would have us to be godly fathers, godly husbands, and to sanctify our family in the Word of God, patiently and not provoking them, not bullying them, not being a dictator, but giving strong spiritual leadership in the home. Yes, Ephesians 5:21 said it very clearly, in subjection to one another in the fear of Christ. That's my thought for the day. God bless you and have a great day.